Good evening and welcome to the July 11th session of the Bellingham City Council. So nice to see so many lovely faces in our audience today. Bellingham City Council meets all requirements of the State of Washington Open Meetings Act. We have one announcement. On Monday, July 25th, 2016, the City Council will host a public hearing at 7 p.m. in the council chambers on an ordinance relating to the council wards of the city. We're going to move to our Pledge of Allegiance, but I just wanted to say yesterday was Mayor Kelly's birthday. We'd like to wish her happy birthday and ask her if she would lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance this evening. Well, I thought about that, but you might not like that, so this will work.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Besides that, you didn't want to hear me sing. Roll call.
April Barker. Here. Dan Hamill.
Here.
Jean Knudsen. Michael Lillequist.
Here.
Roxanne Murphy.
Here.
Pinky Vargas.
Here.
Terry Borneman.
Here.
Okay, so we're going to have two presentations this evening, followed by a public hearing and then public comment, so just in case anybody's wondering on our timeline for this evening. And we are going to start with our very first presentation for the 2016 Governor's Smart Project Award for Alabama Street Multimodal. And we have a special guest this evening from the Department of Commerce, and it's Ike Nwanko? No N. Nwanko. Yeah. And I'll turn that over to Ted, our Public Works Director.
Thank you. Good evening. Ted with the Public Works Department. Very pleased tonight to have Mr. Nwanko here to present us with the governors, to present the city with the Governor's Smart Project Award for the Alabama Multimodal project that we completed last year. A project that came before the council many times, and I think a project that turned out very, very well. So with that, I'd like to ask Mr. Nwanko to come up and go right up to the podium. And this is a project that took about a year to plan. It was funded through the Highway Safety Program. It was a two-part project. The first part of the project was the planning and design, going through many, many different alternatives to determine just exactly what was the best project to deal with the high accident rate along Alabama corridor. And with that, we were able to make several pedestrian improvements, add some bike lane, put in some innovative crosswalks for us using the Hawk system. So it's a project that we're very pleased with. And with that, I'll turn it right over to Ike and go ahead.
Thank you very much. City Council members, the Mayor, and citizens, I am pleased to be here tonight for this award. I want to mention before I start that, of course, you know that this is statewide, and the city of Bellingham should be very proud that their project is one of the several that applied and one of the few that were selected. So congratulations to the City Council, to the participants, project participants, and to the staff for the hard work that they put into the project. I am Ike Nwanko. I am the Western Washington Manager for Growth Management Services, and our offices are in Olympia, and I drove up here for this award. The governor regrets that he couldn't be here tonight, and so he sent me in his place. So I am honored to be here amongst all of you. Commerce is pleased to present this award to the city of Bellingham on behalf of Governor Jay Inslee. This award highlights the governor's commitment to preserving and protecting Washington's enviable quality of life. It recognizes the hard work of our citizens, businesses, and local officials to make sure that we have a clean environment, a healthy economy, and a high-quality communities. All the attributes that make our great state a wonderful place to live, to work, and play, and help us to continue attracting top talents and businesses from around the world. When a community comes together to establish and carry out its vision for the future, it can attract high-quality jobs and community improvements that benefit all its residents. Today, we are celebrating the City of Bellingham's winning 2016 nomination, the Alabama Street Multimodal Safety Improvement Project. The complex 1.7-mile-long Alabama Street project wove together a partial road diet, 6 new pedestrian hybrid beacon, HOC, signal crossings, a transit bus queue jump, relocation and consolidation of transit bus shelters to 5 aligned with HOC signals, 114 curb ramp upgrades to ADA standards, 38 total driveways, alleyways reconstructed to meet ADA sidewalk standards, bike lanes, bike boulevards, bike boxes, center turn lanes, asphalt resurfacing, reduced speed limit, and C-curb median for access management. Today, Alabama Street is safer and also functions better for pedestrians, bicyclists, transit riders, and vehicle drivers, and has reconnected residential neighborhoods that had been bisected by this busy roadway for the past 50 years. The judges that recommended this project for approval had the following comments. Good project with many moving parts. Liked the inclusive agency support. Shows results of Bellingham's pioneering work in complete streets movement. Quite an achievement. Impressive coordination, public involvement, clarity of purpose, search for funding, and finally, a very good partnership program or project. So, congratulations, Mayor Kelly Linville, council members, and all the project partners. We have the award, and we have certificates for all council members and all the project participants that will be handed out. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ike. And really, this the credit really goes to the staff for all the work. So really want to commend the staff for the incredible job that they did on this project. So thank you very much to the staff. Thank you for coming to visit, Ike. We appreciate it. Okay, we're going to move to our second presentation for this evening. And I'm going to, this is a presentation by Dr. Francisco Rios, the Dean of the Woodridge College of Education at Western Washington University, and I am going to let April Barker introduce him.
Oh, yeah. Thank you, Dean Rios, if you'd come forward. Dean Rios, as she said, is the Woodring College Dean. It houses the Center for Education, Equity, and Diversity up at Western. And I invited Dean here tonight to talk on social justice and equity. And this is a legacy that a past council before me, but a couple of these guys were on when they did it, really were proactive and thoughtful in making this a legacy for Bellingham that really guides our policies and decisions. It motivated me to come onto council. It was one of the legacies that really rang true. But as I got further into it, I realized I had a lot of learning to really understand what those words meant. Sometimes we can use those words and not really get the meaning and the understanding behind them. And as I've been out in the community, I've noticed people might get confused between equity and equality, and they are very different. So fortunately, the Dean has volunteered his time tonight, and I'm very thankful for you coming here and giving this time to the council. And with no further ado, social justice and equity.
All right. Thank you. Muy buenas noches y gracias por esta oportunidad de compartir algunos de mis pensamientos sobre justicia social con ustedes. Good evening, and it's a great opportunity for me to share some opportunities and some of the ways that I think about equity, social justice, inclusion, and diversity. It really is a wonderful opportunity, and it's really also a challenge to try to share what is really a difficult concept, and especially when we think about how it plays out in action in just 15 minutes. You know, it's probably even more difficult given that I was 25 years as a professor. We have time issues that way. But we do share a minor in social education for social justice with the Fairhaven College. There are universities that have whole majors in social justice education, and one university has a doctoral program. So this is really an academic field that can really, it has really explored and really tried to understand and both deconstruct and reconstruct the meanings of social justice. And so it makes it especially difficult. So what I want to do is I just want to share some of the general things that I've learned from the field, share them as my personal thoughts and perspectives. But I know that there are many in this council, in this room right now, and of course listening across the city who could probably do as a good a job or even better in thinking about what social justice means and what are its implications. As recent events have shown, social justice issues are really also matters of life and death. The recent rash of killings by police, especially of black males, is evidence. The mass shootings in schools, nightclubs, and even in the recent murder of several police in Dallas, all represent what I would call a culture of violence. It's rooted in a history of violence in our country, both physical violence, but also psychological and symbolic violence, as part of a broader colonizing project. Social injustices are especially rooted in sexism, racism, and homophobia. They're evident in the expansive criminal justice system, in the differential access to quality health care, in public policies that penalize the poor, in inadequate and segregated housing, in reductions in social services, and especially important to me as a Dean of a College of Education, inequality in its many dimensions in schools. So what is social justice? It's contested, it's complicated, and it's dynamic. It's constantly changing. It's ironic that it's used by conservatives to justify the status quo. It's used by liberals to justify social reforms. And so really my hope here is to share some comments that I hope will really spark a conversation among council members and perhaps in the community more broadly. Let me begin by pointing out that the definition and people trying to grapple with social justice has a long history. You can go all the way back to Plato and Aristotle, and to more contemporary folks like John Stuart Mills and the seminal work by John Rawls called A Theory of Justice. Most of us, in terms of the contemporarily, think of social justice growing out of the civil rights movement, drawing heavily on the work of anti-racist, black and ethnic studies, as well as women's studies. Social justice utilizes a framework that considers the dominant or targeted social identity groups, identities such as race, class, gender, and disability, and how those individuals and social groups are placed within a broader social hierarchy. Many social justice scholars bring a level of analysis, including looking at its interpersonal dimensions, including individual attitudes and beliefs, that perpetuate unequal social relations, but they also look to try to understand social forces and social structures that support inequities in social systems. It acknowledges the interrelatedness of phenomena, but especially historical flows, including our historical residue of treating whole groups of people as less than human. It includes the cultural surround and the political economy. It draws on interdisciplinary knowledges of history, psychology, sociology, economics, political science, as part of the way to try to understand, but also tries to attend to local knowledges. What do people understand in a particular place and in a particular space? It looks at issues of power and powerlessness, who has it and who doesn't. It looks at within a nation, and it also looks at privilege, who has that and who does not, within a nation of social hierarchies. But it also values and affirms multiple perspectives and multiple points of view, especially seeking out counter-narratives or counter-stories. It attends to problems of marginalization and oppression, and it works to generate strategies toward their resolution. It urges the individual to abandon individualism, but also consumerism, competitiveness, and conventionality, and to strive instead for consideration of supporting a collective humanity, compassion, well-being, and responsibility to and for others. I like it because at end, it's hopeful and visionary. It looks for things as they might be. There's two dimensions that I want to share here. The first is the different kinds of social justice. I think most of the people, when they think about social justice, think about its interpersonal dimension. That is, the importance of making sure everybody is treated fairly and allowing everyone access to the same quality. People in this dimension of social justice are to be treated with respect, free from discrimination, bias, or stereotyping. Now, some people push against this question of thinking about social justice and equality. But in fact, given recent events, there's lots of instances where even just treating people the same would be a step up. Think about how people have opportunities or not in terms of housing, who gets to vote or not, differences in pay for men and women for similar occupations. So even in some instances, some people would say even trying to get to the equality aspect of fairness and social justice would be worthwhile. Think about the opportunity gaps in schooling, which lead to the achievement gaps. So think about that interpersonal dimension of social justice. The second is distributed fairness. That is what most people use the term equity. That is giving people what they need, but that may be different. We recognize that different people need different things. And we also recognize the need to redress historical and contemporary inequalities, which mean that you may need to do something a little bit more for one group than you would for another. A quote often attributed to Thomas Jefferson said, "There is nothing more unequal than the equal treatment of unequal people." The goal in equity is to get everybody to the same end, even though you may have to treat them differently to get there. The third kind of social justice is procedural fairness. And procedural fairness is really about knowing the rules, so that everybody knows how things work and what it takes to get things done and how to get things changed. And people have not only that knowledge, but they also have access to the power to do so, especially in those decisions that impact them very directly. So those are three different kinds of social justice that we can think about and be thinking in our conversations when we think about what social justice means. I want to share a model of social justice that I find especially productive and helpful for me. And it comes from two scholars named Shurik and Young. And they argue that when you think about social injustice, you want to think about it on four levels or four dimensions. The first is the interpersonal dimension, and I think, again, that's what most people kind of default to. How does one individual treat another individual? But the second level is the institutional level, and that looks at things like policies and procedures and practices that any social institution uses that has either a positive or negative impact on people based on social identity group. Now, the theory is that people vie for power, social groups vie for power. And when one group wins, they create institutional structures in schools, in banking, in government, and economics that work in their favor. I'll just get as a real, just so you have a concrete example. When the U.S. Took over in New Mexico during the end of the Mexican-American War, they made English the official language. Well, what that did, even though 95% of the people who were living in New Mexico at the time were Spanish speakers, is it made decisions around law and how banking was going to get done and how schools were going to get done that favored and advanced people who were English speakers and penalized those who were not. And so that's how institutional injustices occur. So it's looking at the policies, procedures, and practices of public institutions in particular. The third level is the social. And we think about this mostly in terms of national discourses and language. Because if I'm going to come in and I'm going to change things and make it work in the favor of one group at the expense of others, I have to develop a dominant narrative, a societal ethos, that these are the way that things have to be, or that they are, that they're supported, that they're supposed to be, to justify the institutional practices that I've brought into effect. So when we think about the social, we think about how problems are framed, who frames them in that way, and how does that narrow other possible ways of thinking about that particular issue. It looks at how our media coverage is, and I mean, all you have to do is look at how people are talking about the elections, and you get a sense of the contested nature of the national discourses going on. I'll use a great quote here from Sherman Alexie in his classic book, The Lone Ranger and Tonto, Fistfight in Heaven, when he said, quote, "Indians have a way of surviving, but it's almost like Indians can easily survive the big stuff, mass murder, loss of language, and land rights. It's the small things that hurt the most. The white waitress who wouldn't take an order, Tonto, the Washington Redskins," end of quote. So you have the individual, you have the institutional, and now you have these narratives justifying what's occurring at those levels. But now you need an ideology. And an ideology, as you can think about it, is rooted in what's right or wrong, what's good or bad, what's worthwhile or what's worthless. So you can't just create this unfairness. You have to develop an ideology to justify the structures and the narratives, the policies and practices, to make them seem almost right and natural and normal and logical for all. Gramsci describes this connection between the structures and the narratives and the ideologies as cultural hegemony, which shape but don't determine individual actions. So the idea would be this: if we can really get at those ideologies and change those ideologies, change the dominant narratives, and change institutions, you will most likely change individuals. I'm going to leave it to you to figure out the implications of all of this. That's another nice thing about being a professor. But I think all you have to do is really listen to people in this community. They're crying out for opportunities to share with you and with our broader politic, with our broader community, social injustices that are occurring to them every day and in many, many ways. But I'll ask that you consider the following questions. How do you define social justice and its implications for you and for this community? Whose local voices and stories are welcomed in this council? And how do you invite those counter-narratives, those counter-stories? What are the institutional policies and practices, the societal ethos, and the dominant ideological perspectives and narratives that work for or against a social justice perspective in our community? How would you develop and maintain a set of principles that are anti-racist, anti-sexist, anti-homophobic, rooted in social justice, and then guide you in your everyday work? What are some examples of contemporary approaches to assure a more just community and which you might learn from when thinking about those examples? How do you speak back to county, state, and federal policies that prevent you from carrying forward a social justice framework? And finally, how do you navigate this within the contemporary context of hyper-political divisiveness, growing economic inequality, and significant differences along race, class, and gendered lines. One of the things I love about America is that this is democracy in the making. Democracy was made and remade during the Civil War, but we're not there yet. It was made and remade when we assured that women had the right to vote, but we're not there yet. It was made and remade during the Civil Rights period. We're still not done. There are many in this community who stand with you in advancing a vision of our community that is more human, more visionary, more hopeful, and more just. Gracias y vamos adelante. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Rios. We don't usually ask or give time for questions, but if there's anything really specific that any council member wants to ask, if not. No?
Thank
Okay.
you. Yeah,
Okay.
thank you for coming. Very provocative. Appreciate it.
Thank you for your
Thank you again.
time. We appreciate you being here.
Thanks. Appreciate it.
Okay, we are going to move on to our public hearing for the evening. This is a consideration of a request by Lydia Place for a comprehensive plan and zoning text amendments to allow construction up to 11 studio apartments located at 1701 Gladstone Street in the Puget neighborhood. And I am going to turn it over to Greg Ockett from our planning department to give us a little overview of our hearing.
Good evening, Council. Greg Ockett, representing the Planning Department and also the Planning Commission here tonight. Lydia Place has applied for a comprehensive plan amendment and zoning text amendment to add some transitional housing units, up to 11 units, on their property on Gladstone Street. In order to be able to do this, they need these amendments. Council is well aware of the need for this type of housing. And when you docketed this proposal, you indicated that this was something that you wanted us to spend time on and that you were generally supportive of it going through the process. The Planning Commission held a public hearing on May 19th and thereafter unanimously recommended approval of the amendments. We recognize that you won't be making a decision tonight, as is typical with comp plan amendments. But if you have questions or if you need any additional information prior to your next meeting where we would have a work session and get into some of the details of this proposal, let us know. That work session is scheduled for July 25th. As I said, the Planning Commission and staff recommend approval of the amendments. And unless there are questions, I'm going to go ahead and turn the microphone over to the representatives from Lydia Place. Just from the beginning.
Yeah, sure. Display, how to display show. Not that crucial, we could carry on without it.
It should.
I wasn't going to show you anything fabulous on the screen anyway. Well, anyway, while we're working on that, good evening, everyone. Thank you for making time for us this evening. And I'm going to get distracted. That was a tough act to follow. So just lower your expectations a little. And also a really great segue into some of the things that this proposal embodies. So that was a delight to hear. My name is Emily O'Connor. I have the privilege of serving as Executive Director of Lydia Place. And as you may know, Lydia Place has been serving homeless families from our home on Gladstone Street in the Puget neighborhood for over 26 years. In the past 2 years, Bellingham has experienced a startling increase in homelessness. Thank you.
Thank you, Elizabeth.
As our community has struggled with how to respond, the city, the mayor, the county has put out a call to action to any and all who are willing to assist in addressing this crisis. As a dedicated partner in addressing homelessness, Lydia Place is answering that call in many ways. We truly believe that it will take all of us contributing what we can to solve the crisis of homelessness. And in the past few years, Lydia Place has significantly increased our housing placements. We started a parenting program, recently purchased an apartment building, and are collaborating with our local partners to meet the many needs of those who are struggling with homelessness. As an organization that was started to help homeless mothers and children, we have a particular interest in seeing an end to family homelessness, as we witness firsthand the devastating consequences homelessness has on our community's children. We're here this evening offering to build some additional housing units for young mothers who are either pregnant or parenting very young children. We know that investing in these emerging families is an investment in our future and the future of our community. Research has demonstrated, let me see if I can find this slide here. I know that's a little bit small, but what the research has shown us is that adverse childhood experiences early on in life is significantly correlated with homelessness as adults. So that's what you're looking at in that chart there. And this is something that's preventable. We know how to prevent these things. It's simply a matter of taking that action. At Lydia Place, we want to interrupt this cycle for the next generation, and that is what these additional units would provide. As Lydia Place has resided in Gladstone Street for over 25 years, we're dedicated to being responsive and collaborative neighbors. Over the past few months, we've met with many of our amazing neighbors who have been supporters of the work of Lydia Place for many years. We've heard concerns from some about increased density and the impact it will have on them, and we've heard the support from others for building this much-needed housing. We recognize that building more housing comes with an impact on our closest neighbors. The reality is, though, that building in Bellingham is getting tricky. There's not a lot available, and the need for housing is really high. Further, we see the benefits of building support for these families here, where they have already access to a robust array of services and the support of others who are working towards similar goals. To give you a few examples of the children that live in our lives, last year we had a mom, these are just things that have stuck with me. We had a mom enter our transitional housing facility on Gladstone Street with her 2 little boys, and they had been sleeping for 2 months in their car. And, sorry, homeless kids, get you every time. Mom, when we were able to place them right away into our unit, she said one of the biggest things for her was when her son said, "Mom, will we have a home again before my birthday?" Those little things that we all take for granted from our places of privilege that impact our families really significantly. Last week, our case management team at Lydia Place was struggling to find a solution for a 2-parent household living in their car with 3 children under the age of 5. Imagine that, 3 kids, and how do you focus on positive child development while trying to figure out how to sleep head to toe 5 people in a car? A week ago, I received a call from one of our sister agencies, desperate to find a placement for a 20-year-old who was 40 weeks pregnant and on the street. These are the kinds of things that we're working with every day. The success and health of our community, including facilities like these, depends on neighbors participating in keeping children and families safe and holding each other accountable. We continue to encourage our neighbors to partner with us in this way, to reach out with any concerns they have so that we can address them. It was said to us that those people need to be out in the county somewhere. Well, those people, our friends, our neighbors, our children's friends, our fellow humans, and members of our community. It can be easy to speak hypothetically about homeless families, but when you look at the faces of real children full of potential and full of heartbreak, full of opportunity and full of worry, you realize that it is on us to do the right thing. Housing these children is a matter of community values, and this proposal will impact actual children in our community if it's built, and actual children in our community if it isn't. Last week, one of our neighbors submitted a petition signed by many with a couple of conditional requests to you all on the council. And we're grateful that our neighbors have participated in this process and for all of the support that they have shown us over the years. Be happy to answer questions specifically about any of those concerns as we move forward. But before we do that, I want to introduce you to a very special woman who has courageously agreed to come and speak with all of you tonight, which, believe me, is not easy. Cherish Larson is a mother who is one of 400 who's come through our transitional housing program in the past 26 years and found the new start that she needed to build the life she wanted for herself and her children. She shares her story very courageously all over town to break down stereotypes, give back to the program that helped her, and to illustrate what is possible when we step up as a community to support families in need. Thank you, Cherish, for joining us.
Hello, I'm Cherish Larson, and I'm here tonight to tell you a little bit about myself and my journey and how Lydia Place has changed my life and how Lydia Place continues to impact our community. In 2008, I came to live at Lydia Place's in-home transitional program. I was newly sober, I was CPS involved, and I was recovering from a domestic violence relationship. I never had my own place with my children while being sober, and I remember feeling really excited and relieved that we would finally have a place to call home. The Lydia Place staff were welcoming and helpful in my transition into the home. I was able to have a fresh start and build a new me. Lydia Place gave me that fresh start. While I lived at Lydia Place, I learned how to function in a community. Having to live in a home with other women and children definitely presented some challenges. But most of all, living in a community setting taught me how to set and keep boundaries with people, how to trust again, and I also learned how to respect people and their choices, even if I didn't agree with them. This was the beauty in community living. It had taught me things that in my 20 years I hadn't learned. I was able to get a routine in place for my children and myself. I learned skills that I didn't know existed. I practiced using discipline skills with my children I learned in nurturing parenting class offered through Lydia Place. I learned how to cook meals. I didn't know that before Lydia Place. I wasn't taught that. Nobody taught me how to cook. So that was a huge advantage for my family, just learning the basic things that people take for granted. The 10 months I lived at Lydia Place helped me become the woman I am today. Today, I work at the Whatcom County Courthouse as the first parent for parent coordinator. That means I get to mentor families that are involved with CPS that are currently going through what is often the hardest part of their life and the most challenging. I have a gift that was born from a time I almost didn't survive, and that gift is the gift of empowering and encouraging others that are going through and experiencing homelessness, drug addiction, or involvement with the state. I am asking okay, sorry guys. I'm asking you tonight to think about all the other families and children and mothers in this community. I see them every day out on the street, women holding signs with children by their sides, that they're homeless, and it's obvious. We can come together as a community, and we can change this. We have the power, and that's what community is about. It's about coming together and building each other up. And I believe in Lydia Place because they believed in me. My life has changed because of Lydia Place was there for me. I'm asking for you to approve the expansion proposal for the property at Lydia Place. This will positively impact so many families in our community and in return ultimately help build a stronger community as a whole. We might not be able to change the world, but together through your support, we do have the power to change individual lives. And as those individual lives transform, they create a ripple effect and begin to impact and change the family and community around them. The possibilities of who we can bring hope to is endless, and I look forward to us all working together to continue bringing this hope to the people and community around us. Thank you.
Thank you, Cherish, for sharing your story with us. It's our hope at Lydia Place that every mother has the support she needs to accomplish what Cherish has accomplished. And we know that that impact and support has not only an impact on Cherish, but on her children and on their children and their children for generations to come. That's the impact we can have. Last week, we got to celebrate 2 graduations of previous residents, both who graduated with degrees at the technical school and were able to send us pictures of, their kids in one arm and their diplomas in the other. And those are the moments where we know that it's success, right? It's getting them from this path that has really bleak outlook to a path that has them coming back and participating like this as members of our community that we all should have opportunities to participate in. Sorry, digress. We are dedicated to the precious resources that we are charged with stewarding in our community, and this proposal is an offer to our community to step up and do more with just such a resource. This is a time when circumstances demand creativity, flexibility, and action. And we firmly believe that if we lead with compassion and generosity, we can end homelessness as we know it today in our community. Providing safe, nurturing, and supportive environments for our most vulnerable and emerging families is an investment not only in the lives of those children, but in the health and well-being of our entire community. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions that you have. And again, thank you so much for your time and consideration of this request.
Council, any questions right now? Councilmember Hamel.
Thank you for the presentation this evening. Thank you, Cherish, for your remarks tonight. I had a question as relates to the average expected tenancy of the 11-unit project. How long do you expect women and kids to live in each unit for how long? And then what does that look like in, like a 10-year span of how many clients served?
I haven't done a 10-year calculation.
You have to do the math, but I just want to get a sense of...
Great question, and I did want to clarify, these are permanent housing units that we're proposing, so not transitional housing units, which is what's currently on the property. And we would, what we know is that folks naturally move on from these types of supportive living environments, and that's what we want, right? So this program comes with really intensive case management and parenting support. And when families get to the place where we can celebrate their graduations and their new jobs, we want them to move into places where they're no longer needing and taking up those resources and opening them for other families. And so we would be looking at probably anywhere from 12 to 24 months on average. Could be longer, absolutely. Just depends on the needs of the family.
Thank you.
Yes.
Councilmember Parker.
So in regards to the petition, I think they were asking for a cap on numbers. Mm-hmm. Would you like to speak on that?
Sure. Lydia Place has no objection to a cap on the number of people on the property. There is a natural cap. It's a wetland property, so there's only so many developable square feet. And so it has a natural cap, and also the units themselves would have a natural cap. You just can't cram that many bodies into a space and expect good outcomes. So in the original proposal, we had proposed an increase to an existing cap, which I understand is maybe not planning's preference to have those actually prescriptively written into the zoning. So that's where I back out of the equation, but I don't have any objection to it.
Well, I, of course, want to applaud the amazing work that you do, and I watched some of the Planning Commission meetings and some constituents' concerns about this being at the entrance of their neighborhood. And I can tell you, being a past president of a neighborhood and being overly joyed that you all would consider our neighborhood, and it's right at the entrance. And so I think when the dean talks about changing narratives and that ideology, I think you can flip that. I mean, this is showing a concerned neighborhood that wants to work together and is willing to put it at the forefront. So it's kind of serendipitous that your guys' presentations happened today. So thank you for all of your hard work, and I appreciate it.
Council, any other questions? Okay, Greg, is there anything else you would care to add? I've got the list for the public hearing right here. And as I call your name, a couple things to keep in mind is this is a safe civil environment for everyone to have an opportunity to say their speech. So you have 3 minutes, but there is no jeering or clapping. We let cherishes go by because, well, it was a little special. But other than that, if you could please state your name and the names so far. We have Greg Winter, Janice, Mark, oh, and if I mispronounce your name, just correct us. James, and then Steve and Jeff.
Thanks, Becky. Thank you, Council, Mayor Linville, citizens. I just have some brief comments to make in strong support of the Lydia Place project. At Opportunity Council, I'm sorry, Greg Winter, Executive Director of Opportunity Council. At Opportunity Council, as you know, we operate the Homeless Service Center, and part of the purpose of the Homeless Service Center, one of the reasons for its existence is that we know at any point in time who in our community is homeless. We know them by name, we know their situation, we know their characteristics, so that we can, as best we can with the scarce resources available, help match them to housing opportunities to help provide them stability, crisis stabilization, and hopefully, ultimately, a pathway out of poverty. So that's what we try to do. I checked with my staff this afternoon at the Homeless Service Center, and tonight we know there are 21 single moms with children under 6 years old sleeping in cars or tents in the city of Bellingham. And it's part of our homeless population that we don't see very much. You know, we often see single unaccompanied individuals that might be on the street or hanging out in our parks, but we don't typically see the families with kids. And kids under 10 years old make up at any given point in time between 15 and 20% of our overall homeless population. And it's just shocking. And I mention this to you because this project, were it possible to put it on the ground this evening, about half of those families would have a place to live. And not just a place to live. The services that Lydia Place provides is way more than half of what they're providing to the community and to the families. They have evidence-based practices that they employ that you've heard about, some about this evening more eloquently than I can ever describe them, but it's really important. And I'm glad that we had this brief discussion prompted by Dan's question about how long people on average would be living in this project, because apropos of some of what Dean Rios had to tell us tonight, we have many different types of housing resources in the community, but we have far too few that don't have arbitrary time limits on them. And so through this project, those families with children that need more time will get what they need rather than everybody getting the same thing. So thank you very much.
Janice Marliga?
Janice Marlega. Good evening. I'm a long-term resident, almost 20 years, and property owner in the Puget neighborhood, and live near and drive and walk by the existing Lydia Place facility on a regular basis. As stated previously, I understand the need and appreciate the efforts of the city and Lydia Place staff in addressing Bellingham's growing homeless problem, but I have concerns and question the size of the expansion plans proposed for the Gladstone site. The two major concerns that I have regarding the proposed Lydia Place expansion plans are the removal of the cap on the number of occupants and the lack of 24/7 supervision. The other property owners that live close to 1701 Gladstone and are personally aware of the challenges and impacts that the existing facility has on the neighborhood have voiced the same concerns and is supported by the signatures on the petition included in the council packet. The current facility is located in a neighborhood of residential single-family homes. The current and proposed zoning of this site is residential single. The new permanent housing proposed is a building with 11 apartments. So you have the mix of the single-family and the residential and the multifamily, which can be a very challenging balance. Under the current zoning, the permitted use is no more than 32 total occupants in the 62,000 square feet, which is the 1.4 acres. But half of that site is forested wetland and non-buildable. And then that only leaves then the 0.7 acres for the existing and proposed buildings and the parking and the other associated facilities. The proposed amendment to the Puget zoning table deletes the special regulation which completely removes any cap on the number of total occupants per that available land. I'm wondering, why was the cap removed? And without the cap, what is the full build-out of the site? And what can the property owners in this area expect to see on this site in the future? There's a big unknown. In addition, the proposed amendment does not address the development standards and design review that will apply to this type of development. Is this single family or is this multifamily? From my observations, oversight of the facility appears to be inconsistent. Currently, Lydia Place does not provide a 24/7 supervisor on site. After hours, the neighbors are expected to report problems, and this is what we've been doing for 15 plus years. Although the Planning Commission and Lydia Place staff acknowledge that there will be impacts to the neighborhood as a result of the expansion plans, no mitigation has been proposed. In order to maintain some of the character of the single-family neighborhood, I'm asking the council to consider keeping a cap on the total number of allowed occupants in the Lydia Place facility, and then also requiring the 24/7 supervision.
Thank you
very
Janice.
much.
Thank you.
3 minutes was fast.
Yeah.
And I also have an updated petition that I'd like to turn in.
Okay. Next, we have Steve James.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Steve James. I live in the Puget neighborhood. And I guess I should do kind of an acknowledgement, a disclaimer to begin with. Many of you know me as the president of the Puget Neighborhood Association, and I was also the mayor's representative to the Puget neighborhood for the Mayor's Neighborhood Advisory Council. I'm not here to speak on their behalf. The Puget Neighborhood Association Board has discussed this matter and believes and asked me to report to you that as in all projects, we expect that it to move forward openly for the process, that it be transparent, and that citizens be given a chance to comment on anything. And that's the way we feel about any development that happens in the neighborhood. Some of you also know that I'm a member of the board of Lydia Place. And I'm not here to speak on behalf of the board of Lydia Place. I could not be as clear, as eloquent as Emily is about it. No, I'm here as a neighbor. I live in the Puget neighborhood. I live 2/10 of a mile away from Lydia Place. I drive by there every day. I walk by there often. I've known of Lydia Place long before I was a board member, or long before I was a neighborhood. Come on, you can sit down if you like. I don't want to make you stand there. And so I know the work that's done there. Change is difficult in neighborhoods. I know that. I'm aware of that. In my little block on Undine Street, when I bought the house a little over a year and a half ago, there were 2 lots across the street, lovely empty lots, had over a dozen big fir trees on them. One of the landowners was nice enough to let us put in a neighborhood garden. We had a neighborhood vegetable garden. It was one of the reasons I bought the house. Within a year, the lots sold, and the chainsaw started, and the trees went down, and the 2 houses started being built, and the rumors were flying. You know, what's going to happen to parking? They're going to be multifamily in there. What happens if they put in a rental and students move in there, for God's sake? And, you know, it was a real disruption in the neighborhood. I can tell you now that we have one of the houses is finished, is occupied. The owner doesn't live in it. His 2 daughters, they are students, and they're going to school, and when they graduate, the owners are going to move to Bellingham and retire there. The other home is going to be occupied by a gentleman that has been trying for years to own a home, and he was able to buy the lot, and he's building the house himself. So we got 2 neighbors. Parking's still a problem, but it always is in Bellingham. But our fears aren't always realized. But change is tough, and so I understand that there are people within the neighborhood that are scared about what's going to happen. This city is aware of homelessness is in our face. I mean, I can't walk downtown, you can't walk downtown, we can't pull off at any exit on I-5 into town and not see somebody that's homeless, and it's in our face. And the council's done a laudable job of trying to address it. The mayor's written a letter to the governor asking for a declaration of emergency. We're trying to do something.
Steve, you have 30 seconds. We didn't set the clock, just so you know.
Okay, well, I'm just about wrapping it up. And for over 25 years, which is before most of the housing has even been there, Lydia Place has been trying to address as best it can, one client at a time, 5 clients at a time, some of that homeless pot. So it's been there. It's something that's there. I'm going to ask you guys, when you're considering this proposal, to ask yourselves 2 questions in regards to whether or not Lydia Place in this particular state should expand. If not here, where? And if not now, when?
Thank you, Steve. Next, we have Jeff Beaumont. And then after that is Rihanna Bardsley and Jeff Chikari. Maybe? Jacoby? There's no hole in there.
Hi, good evening. My name is Jeff Beaumont. I live at 131 South 41st Street. I want to speak in support of Lydia Place. I work downtown, and each morning when I come to work, usually around 6 o'clock, I get to see some of the homeless families living in cars. We have a public washroom at the building that I work in, and when that opens up, many people can't wait to get in there. They hurry, they have a chance. They don't just use the washroom, they wash their faces, they wash their hair, they take care of the stuff they have to take care of. It's a very difficult time. I also serve on the board of the United Way. That's how I heard about Lydia Place. Lydia Place does good work. They provide outcomes for families. They make a difference. I don't get a chance to make a big difference as they do, but I like to know that I'm doing a little bit to help. I also live pretty much in the neighborhood, about a mile away. I ride my bike there at least all summer long when I commute to work. They do good work, they help the community, and they make us a better place to live. I hope you consider them as a good neighbor to come our way. Thank you.
Hi, good evening. I'm Rihanna Bardsley. I'm the Executive Director of Northwest Youth Services. And I convinced Emily O'Connor to get in a car with me and drive down to Kirkland a couple of years ago to tour some places that Friends of Youth provided, some housing projects. And in that car ride, we got really clear about the desperate need that our community was seeing for housing for young people, both individuals and for young families. And we started talking about what is possible and what resources we as individual agencies had. And so Northwest Youth Services has a lot, and we're working on building on that. And Lydia Place has a lot, has property, and they're working on building on that. And we are doing that because, one, we see, just like everybody else does, and that has been talked about, the increasing amount of individuals and families that are experiencing homelessness, the lack of affordable housing that is being built, as well as the call from both the county and the city to do something about this. And we've been active participants in having conversations about how we actually make an impact in this area, and over again, it's about building housing, and it's about offering supportive services to people so that they can move from living in their cars or living on the streets to graduating and sending pictures of their baby in one hand and their diplomas in another hand. And that's what we're doing, and that's what they're offering. That's what Lydia Place is offering the city, and I'm grateful for it. And I hope that other nonprofits also can step up and take a leap of faith and take on the risk that is building, because this is a big project. These are complex. There's lots of challenges that we're learning along the way, and the support of our city council and the support of our citizens shouldn't be one of them. We have enough already. So I just will end with one. I'm going to end with two. I'm going to end with two things. One is Greg left you with a number from his housing interest pool, his wait list, that he sees. Northwest Youth Services sees another one. We have 100 young people on our wait list right now. Half of them are families. So we have 50 just that Northwest Youth Services identifies. One of those young people came in on Friday afternoon, and she was a young lady. She had her toddler, her 3-year-old, with her, and she stood at our front reception area with tears rolling down her eyes, asking where she could go, and there was nowhere. Thank you.
Thank you, Rhiannon. Jeff, Jacoby, and then Bill Geyer.
The gentleman, the president of the Puget Sound neighborhood.
Everybody gets 3 minutes.
He got 6.
No, he didn't. I told him that the clock was reset, and I gave him the appropriate
Okay,
time.
I was just making sure because
You're cutting into your time.
Oh, I am. Oh, wow. Well, thank you. Good evening, and thank you for your time. This has been a very frustrating process as a neighbor who's going to watch their neighborhood and community completely change without much input into these changes. The wholesale sellout by the planning department, thanks, Greg, is the biggest disappointment in this whole process. We as a neighborhood had requested an ability to present today. We were denied that ability, so we get this limited time to speak and present our side of this conversation. One of the hardest part of this whole process is the feeling of being completely taken advantage of by both the city and Lydia Place in this process. We were made aware of Lydia Place 2 years after they had started this process, getting the planning department fully back them before they even presented to the neighborhood. I'm not sure if this is standard issues for development, but it's quite frustrating to be involved with. In each of the last 3 meetings, Lydia Place has touted their openness and neighborhood involvement. Those words ring truly hollow when there were 2 years of planning before they even happened to bring this up to the surrounding neighborhood about what they were going to do. There is a constant lack of communication, engagement in the neighborhood, and general respect for the neighbors. Emily stated that there are a few neighbors that are against this project when you have a petition in your hand of over 20 households in the neighborhood that have signed against this project. 20 direct households. I can't tell you how many times I would have called the cops on Lydia Place if it was just another home because of how loud and disrupting they can be. I haven't done that because I respect what they're doing, I understand what they're doing, and I don't want repercussions to escalate to their children. But to add this burden, this increased burden to the neighborhood is asking a lot of people. There is an old saying that messing with someone's money is like messing with their emotions, and I can tell you that that's pretty spot on. This development of temporary housing for people with limited life skills is going to affect my property values. There is no way that you can logically say otherwise. To know the value of my home is going to be affected and watch as I literally lose money is frustrating. It's not right. I have tried to explain to you, to the Lydia Place, and to the planning department that I'm not okay with this, but like everything else, it seems to have fallen on deaf ears. As you know, our country was founded on a set of inalienable rights that guarantees life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness or private property, as Thomas Paine actually wrote it. These rights are enacted through codes, laws, regulations, etc., and are set by all levels of the government, including you guys. The oath that you've taken is to represent the people that you elected. This is the framework for our city, our county, our state, and our nation. And the foundation of this framework is a basic principle that you are to express the will of the minority while protecting the rights of express the will of the majority while protecting the rights of the minority. I'm asking you to protect my rights. I'm asking you to protect the rights of those around us. I look at each one of you. If this was going on in your neighborhood, across the street from your house, would you allow this to happen?
Thank you, Jeff.
Be honest with yourself on that.
Thank you, Jeff. Bill Geyer. Oh, no, dock him. He handed out handouts.
I get reset. Yeah, here we go. I broke the clock. Greg tells me, was it an ugly face is right twice a day? Is that what you say? Yeah, okay. When you're looking at the clock. Anyway, I'm Bill Geyer. Good evening. 1008 16th Street. I'm here representing myself, speaking on position I have in support of the Lydia Place rezone, and also to offer some history to the council. And actually, this is history that Mr. Borneman and Mr. Knutson precedes your position on the council, which is interesting. And I think this history will assist you tonight. And that is that I went back through the city's files, and from 1980 through 1990, 1701 Gladstone had 7 conditional use permit hearings to either approve or deny a permit or to do a review of a permit. And several of those hearings, this is before the Board of Adjustment, as you know, that preceded today's hearing examiner system. They were for such uses as a juvenile group home, health retreat and school, home for the aged, juvenile group home for sleeping only, a drug alcohol day treatment center for juveniles, and a juvenile alternative education day school with behavioral modification. And each use was approved by the Board of Adjustment with conditions. None of them lasted greater than 2 years. A withering history for a neighborhood over a decade to go through that many conditional use permits. That revolving door ended in 1990 when Lydia Place purchased this property. We now have a 26-year history of a sustainable organization serving a much-needed population in our community. This larger home was originally in an area fairly undeveloped. Many of you know that you've been here a long time. That remained forested for quite some time. And it's interesting that after Lydia Place took occupancy in 1990, there were some modifications by the previous users, but then the neighborhoods that we see today grew up around Lydia Place from 1993 forward. In the letter that I've handed to the clerk, a copy to the council here shortly, for example, the areas to the east along Toledo Court, Toledo Street is Pinewood Hills Division 1, built in 1993. East along Ponderosa Drive is Pinewood Hills Divisions 2 and 3, built in 1994. North on St. Paul Street is Pinewood Hills Divisions 5 in 97, the Hemlock Cluster Subdivision in 1995, and the St. Paul Short Plat in 1994, all post-1990. In other words, the homeowners and subsequent owners have full awareness of Lydia Place. I'd like to add that in 1996, the staff changed the zoning to make it a permitted use, and the staff tonight and the Planning Commission in its findings has done an eloquent job of defining both the City Comprehensive Plan, policy supporting this, and the Growth Management Act. Please make the right decision. I urge you to vote in the yes so that Lydia Place has a stable land use component for the next 25 years and beyond. Thank you. Mr. Lillquist?
Thank you, Bill. Is there anyone who was not signed up on this list that would care to speak? Please come down and state your name for the record if you could. You have 3 minutes.
Hello, my name is Byron Seegers. I live at 1532 Toledo Court and have been there since 1996, coming on 20 years. I live there in my home with my family, with wonderful neighbors, in what has always been a very special neighborhood. I've been aware of Lydia Place since we moved in. Myself and my family have always been very supportive of the work that they do. I think it's essential and it's valuable. As a father, I'm both a biological and an adoptive father of a domestic child. I understand the need to help children. As to my family, we're highly committed to that value. I would say, as a homeowner and as a citizen and as a neighbor, a resident of the Puget neighborhood, a wholesale change potentially of the wonderful feel that we have is disconcerting. You know, it wasn't too long ago that Regency Place was built right behind my house. And we've felt the impacts of that over the years. It hasn't always been pleasant. I'm old enough to know which way the wind's going to blow. And I have a strong feeling that the City Council will approve this. And I would ask you, in doing so, which I don't have any huge objection to doing, but as you are committed to serving homeless mothers and their children, I would ask you to show the same commitment to the people who live in this neighborhood. And, you know, Bill's point that many of us came after 1990, well, fine. But Lydia Place was not a permanent living place for however many people when we moved in and made it our home. So it's really not a fair point. I think to be fair is should be all of our goal, we have to be fair to everybody. So I would ask you strongly to consider these caps. I would ask you strongly to consider the need for supervision, not just during business hours. I would ask you strongly to consider parking concerns. You cannot park the vehicles that the future residents will require on the property. I ask you strongly to consider the other neighbors' rights and quality of life. And as Jeff's point as well, not to be, an elitist, not in my backyard, but, property value and all that is a concern. So if the city does its part to support the other residents as they do their part to support the rest of our community, then we've all worked well together. Thank you.
Thank you, Byron. Anyone else? Ladies, did you? And if you could just please state your name for the record.
Hi, my name is Barbara Lewis. I just started teaching at Northwest Indian College a couple years ago. I teach developmental education English, so that's basically pre-101 English. I have my BA from Central Washington University, and I'm also the mom of a 3-year-old. So I'm a first-generation college student, and just in one generation, I'm seeing, well, in a couple generations, I'm seeing how much differently I'm growing up and my son is growing up than my great-great-grandparents have. I read to my son every night. I put him to bed the same time every night. We're on a schedule. And a lot of things that I'm learning teaching, I'm using the knowledge that I'm using teaching and parenting, and they kind of bounce back off of each other. A lot of my students, they're not even thinking about reading to their kids because they're wondering where they're going to sleep. They're wondering where they're going to get their next meal. I've had a lot of students that have lived out in Lydia Place and have lived out in the women's shelter, which I actually live next to out in Lummi. And, this goes back to the equity versus equality. It might not be fair to the residents that are living by Lydia Place, but you know what? I think that people that own their own homes, they got read to when they were children. And looking at the studies, you learn so much more so fast when you're read to as a child. And as a teacher, I'm dealing with the repercussions of people dealing with crisis all the time. Students are coming into these dev ed classes so behind because they didn't have the opportunities that I think most of us grew up with. And that's so hard because I wish I could get to my students younger. I was talking to one of my mentors, about how to make a difference, how to make the biggest impact. And he says that you need to work with kids 0 to 6, and that will make the biggest difference because that is when children need the most support. And you can't support children without supporting the whole family. And that's what Lydia Place is going to do. So please vote yes. Thank you.
Thank you, Barbara.
Good evening. My name is Christy Dominguez, and I am the Director of Early Childhood Education for the Bellingham School District. My job is I am charged to work with our community and support our students prenatal through 3rd grade. I work closely with Lydia Place on a regular basis as we receive the students that they are helping support those families. One of the programs that we work closely with is the GRADS program. It's the Teen Parenting Program. We support all of Whatcom County. Just this summer alone, we have had 6 phone calls of students, unaccompanied youth, who have children or are pregnant and are couch surfing. I think of a story of a little girl that was born into, when her parents were with us in the program, she was born typical developing, and soon after her family lost housing. We lost track of this family because they were just going from, door to door every night trying to find something, and finally found a van, and we're living in the van. By the time we got this young lady back, she had developmental delays. This is what happens to children. By age 3, we can easily look at the achievement gap. So as a school system, we know that by kindergarten, it's really oftentimes too late because of opportunity. We often think of opportunity as preschool, but opportunity is housing, it's having a meal, it's knowing every night that you're safe. Come into our kindergarten classrooms and see children who do not know where they're going to go that night, where they're going to get their next meal. It happens every single day here in Bellingham, and it's getting larger and larger. We have to do something about it. It's not up to one group. It's not up to Lydia Place. It's not up to the school district. It's up to us as a community. We are responsible for these children, and what Lydia Place is trying to do is something that we're all asking, how do we do it? And they're stepping up, and they've come up with a solution. I think it's our obligation to support them. Thank you.
Thank you, Christy. Is there anyone else who cares to say testimony for the public hearing? Going once, twice, 3 times? Okay, the hearing will be open for public comment until July 24th, and when we come back on July 25th, we will be voting. Anything, council members, anything else? Councilmember Lillquist.
Yeah, I guess between now and then, I'd like to ask staff a question. One of the things that confused me is why is this even being dealt with in the zoning code? Each is at the cap, and apparently the staff responded, well, you don't do that in zoning. Where do you do that? So I guess the question I'd like to have clarified is, where is any of this, could this be enshrined in writing, or should it even be enshrined in writing? So that'd be my question between now and then.
Okay, and we'll think about that. But I think you're correct. Putting a cap in the zoning is not the best way to do it, and so we'll mull over some options and see if we can't come up with a better way to do it.
Councilmember Lillquist.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't complete this also. We had this memo from you, and it talks about an amendment proposed by the Planning Commission. Is that amendment in the current draft, or that's just floating out there as another idea? This is required to have a city-approved organizational master plan.
That was a condition that the commission developed as part of their process, so they recommended approval with that condition that there be an
So again, my question
organizational
is,
master
where
plan.
does the condition live if we wanted to do one?
Well, it could live in the zoning. Again, I don't think that's probably the best place for it. The city provides funding to Lydia Place. There's perhaps an opportunity there. We do look at their operational plan when we're providing funding for various services or for capital projects. That may be the most appropriate place for a condition like that. Again, that's something that we can talk about in the work session, but placing a condition like that in the zoning is not a good idea, from our perspective anyway.
Okay. Council members, any other questions? Okay, so that concludes our city attorney.
Yeah,
Peter
just
Mercado.
a clarification. Is it your intent to have just the written
Just the written
comment open?
comment. Yeah,
Yeah, okay.
that is correct, right? That till the day before. Okay, keep me in line, Peter. All right, and that concludes our public hearing for this evening on the Lydia Place. Maybe we'll just take a little 1-minute break if there's anybody that wishes to leave, and then we will go on to public comment. So. 1 minute is not enough time for council members to get up. Yeah, well, he does his own thing. Thank you all for coming. Oh, she did? Okay. Joseph's still here. Okay, let's get back at it. We got a really long agenda and a lot of things to get through, so we're going to start with our public comment, and our first person is Joseph McDonald. Joseph, if you could please come to the podium. Joseph's coming down. Joseph was on the top of the list, and then Ann Mackey, so Ann is not here, so unless she reappears when Joseph's done. Seth has done that trick many times.
My name is Joseph McDonald, and you know I have a speech amendment. The city of Bellingham is in holy war with the false doctrines of Christianity. I try my best to convince people that the holy war is real. I would like to remind people that the priests won't go away by ignoring them. Nobody seems to like the priests, but nobody will protest them either. This gives them a license to display their dark message of hate. I believe if you don't oppose them, then you are for them by default. A lot of people think they're going to burn forever. I believe this is the #1 false belief in Christianity that gives people a good reason to deny God. It is a belief that the priests strongly promote. I believe that every Christian has to ask themselves these two questions. #1, is Jesus Christ just as sick and sadistic as Adolf Hitler? And #1, are the priests, are the fires of Sodom and Gomorrah still burning today? The Bible-bashing priests know they're on the wrong path and realize people won't protest them. They know what they are doing. I would like to say the priests are wolves in sheep's clothing, but their personalities are quite ferocious. They are not keeping it a secret that they are really evil hate mongers. Their goal is to incite hate and are very successful at it. Their tactics are to make people mad and argue with them, and when the argument is about to turn physical, they turn their body cams on and call the cops and say, "This guy is picking on me." They want to argue with you and for you to stoop at their level instead of constructively opposing them. Also, in my pursuit to encourage people to protest them, I find a great denial and ignorance of them. This makes me very sad and ashamed of the citizens of Bellingham, including City Council. By arguing with them, you are throwing fuel on the fire, but by being silent, the people of the city are actually saying, "We like the evil hate mongers." Please make it a point to go to Farmers Market and protest them, whether they're there or not. I will provide a sign from 12:30 to 1:30. If everyone says such to themselves,
Joseph,
someone else will do this, then nobody will do it. Thank you, and God bless America while you're still here.
Thank you, Joseph. And just for future, just know that you can't promote something that you're doing at the podium for public comment, okay? Thank you. Okay, so anyone else for public comment? Is there anyone else? No? Okay, well, that's quick. And we are going to move on to our committee meetings today. And just to let everyone know, we had a very, very full agenda this afternoon, so note that we might be a little abbreviated, but we encourage you to watch this afternoon's committee meetings because we may be going through things a little quickly, but all the information and all the work we did this afternoon is on the video. Okay, our first meeting, committee meeting today was Parks and Recreation, and April Barker stood in for chair this afternoon.
Thank you. We had one item in committee, amendment to the Whatcom Falls Park Master Plan for the addition of a bicycle pump track. Committee recommended approval, and I so move.
Second. Okay, we have a motion in front of us. Any discussion?
I'm sorry, I didn't get that. Who seconded? Thank you.
We're rocking. Any discussion, council? All right, so we have an amendment to the Whatcom Falls Master Plan for the addition of a bicycle pump track. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 7-0. Woohoo, bike track.
End of committee.
All right. The next committee was Lake Whatcom Reservoir and Natural Resources, and Councilmember Dan Hamill is the chair.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We had two items before us this afternoon. The first one was an ordinance amending the 2015-2016 adopted budget to account for additional funding in the amount of $474,128 from the Department of Ecology for the Bioretention Hydrologic Performance Study EV-1.0 EV-0133. The committee recommended approval, and I so move.
Second.
We have a motion in front of us. Any discussion? Okay, all those in favor of passing the ordinance amending the 2016 budget for the Department of Ecology Bioretention Hydraulic Performance Study, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 7-0.
Second item before us was a review or report from the June 13, 2016 Lake Whatcom Policy Group meeting. That policy group meets once a month to discuss issues that are germane to the lake and the watershed. We had 3 items before us. I'm just going to briefly hit the high notes on this. The full narrative can be found on today's video from this afternoon's work session. So we talked about homeowner incentive program, future of that homeowner incentive program, part 2. We had a presentation on the Lake Whatcom residential build-out report and an update on transfer of development rights program. The next Lake Whatcom Policy Group meeting will be July 18th, 2016, 3 p.m. at the Fireplace Room at 625 Halleck Street. End of committee.
Thank you, Councilmember Hamel. The next is Finance and Personnel, and Councilmember Murphy is chair.
We had one agenda item. It was an ordinance amending the 2016 Fire Department budget relating to the City of Bellingham and Whatcom County Fire District 8 interlocal agreement. The committee unanimously recommended approval, and I so move.
Second.
Any discussion? Okay, we have a motion in front of us amending the 2016 Fire Department budget and District 8 interlocal agreement. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 7-0.
End of committee.
Thank you. Rocking right along. Community and Economic Development is chaired by Councilmember Barker.
Thank you. We had one item for committee. The city entered into an exclusive negotiation agreement with the Bellingham Housing Authority on February 8, 2016, and staff provided an update on status of the negotiations. This was information only. End of committee.
Wow. Okay, so we are going to move to Committee of the Whole, right? Did I get them all? No. We had 9 items in front of us today. I'm going to actually go in the order that they are presented in our agenda, even though that they were moved around this afternoon to accommodate people's timing. So first we had a presentation by State Representative Jeff Morris, who represents the 40th District. He talked about the legislative session for 2016. He spoke a little bit about the why we didn't get some of the multifamily tax credits, that a lot of the challenges this year, their priorities were education and housing. So a lot of the funding that we didn't get this year are relevant to where those credits went. Also looking at mental health needs, which currently right now are being taken care of by, or I shouldn't say taken care of, are often defaulted to our incarceration, and just how looking at diversity of treatment is a priority for the legislature. Also mentioned the solar tax credit, which we had bipartisan support in the House, but did not get a vote on the Senate side. Discussed MACTA money, and Bellingham Bay money was untouched. We have our funds, we're still with there. And also McCleary decision, which we have to come up with $3 billion for our educational system. And that's something they're working on right now. So biggest challenges probably for the upcoming session is environmental funding, and education and mental health services seems to be a we can't have no magic ball, but we think that those are going to be some of the priorities for 2017. The next item, we had a presentation from the Whatcom County Commission Against Domestic Violence. They gave us their annual report. Susan Marks gave our presentation, which was really great if anybody has an opportunity to go back and take a look at them. They outlined some of the projects that they actually do for our community. This is, education. This goes into our schools. There are different things out in the community. So a lot of the funding has to do with actual projects that they are involved in our community and how they're trying to make a difference and change the face around domestic violence and hopefully provide prevention and alternative for our community. And the third item was an ordinance establishing an independent salary commission to review and set the salaries for the elected officials of the city of Bellingham. We had a mixed recommendation of 5-1, and let me just see if I'm missing anything under this. Just to let everyone know, this salary commission is an independent, and the commission only is for 1 year and will be reconvened every 4 years. Yeah, okay, all right, getting those notes. Okay, so there was a mixed approval for this afternoon.
I'll move approval.
I'll second it.
Thank you. All those in favor of establishing the ordinance for an independent salary commission, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Motion carries 6-1. Item number 4 was the adoption of the International Fire Code 2015 edition. We are updating from 2012 to the 2015 edition. And Bill Hewitt, Assistant Fire Chief, gave us a little presentation on that, but also expanded to tell us how they did a lot of collaboration and community and process involvement with the builders and in regards to building codes and with the fire marshal. So this was recommended for approval, and I so move.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 7-0. And I'm going along rather quickly, so if there is something that you feel is pertinent, please do interrupt me, and we will include that in the conversation. Number 5 was to authorize the mayor to enter an interlocal agreement with the Whatcom County Economic Development grant funding to construct waterfront district arterial streets. We did have a presentation from Ted Carlson, our Public Works Director, and this we recommended approval.
I so move.
Second.
Any discussion? Okay, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 7-0. Item number 6 was to approve and authorize the mayor to enter into an interlocal agreement between the City of Bellingham and Whatcom County to finance the 2016 Aquatic Invasive Species Boat Inspection Program. This is about us being able to accept the county's portion of the funding, and we did have a presentation by Ted Carlson, and this was unanimously recommended. Oh, no, it wasn't. It was a mixed recommendation. I apologize. Thank you.
I'll move approval.
It was a long day. Okay. Any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
Okay. Motion carries 6-1. Item number 6 was the Waterfront District Implementation Status Report, which was given by Tara Sundin, our Economic Development Manager. This was very exciting for most of us to see things and talk about actual things happening down at the waterfront, not just hypothetical, but if you've seen all the machinery down there, that gives us a little bit of excitement. So she gave us a really great presentation, and I do encourage people to look at the afternoon presentation that shows the vision of Harcourt. It shows our phase 1, which is including the granary building, which their portion is predominantly, that is Harcourt's, and the city park, which is going to be built in the first stage as well. So just to differentiate between the differences in responsibility, the granary building is responsible, the port is responsible in the city streets, and the city park is the city's responsibility. Again, there was some really great information in there, so I encourage you all to take a look at that, but we are very excited to know that quite possibly the granary could be operational and good by July 2017, and that we will be seeing evidence of a park down there in the spring of 2017. So this is all really great news. Councilmember Lillquist.
Yeah, I have a question for our Parks Director. I apologize. I think I should already know this answer, but I don't. This afternoon we talked about how the Greenery Avenue project is fully funded. There's also a $3.8 million for the Phase 1 of the Whatcom Waterway Park. Is that also fully funded at this point? I know we're in the planning phases now, but in the construction phase, are we fully funded for that one?
Yes, we've identified full funding for that.
Great, thank you.
Okay, so that was for information only, and again, really great stuff in our presentation, and there's some information on our packets as well. Number 8 was an update on the medical marijuana industry. So in statewide, the law changed so that as of July 1st, medical and recreational stores, I guess one's a dispensary, one's a store, but they are all under the same regulation now under Washington State Liquor and Cannabis Board, and that we are following all state regulations. We have spoken to anyone who was on the medicinal side to make sure that all companies that are operating have moved to the new license or they are no longer in existence. There is one company that we are still working on, and the city is working on the enforcement and the next steps on that process. Just to give people information, the city of Bellingham has 12 licenses, and we have 9 operating facilities at this time. There appears to be some new regulation around registry for medical dispensaries, and the legislation is working out all the implications of how that is changing the industry. But the city of Bellingham is aware of who's all licensed and who should no longer be operating for collective gardens. Okay, so we go on to item number 9, which was the review of the draft 2016 comprehensive plan, specifically the land use chapter and housing chapter. And Greg, I'm going to bring you up and see if you would care to do some highlights and see if there's anything in particular that you would like to point out.
Greg Ockett, Planning Department. I thought we had a really good discussion, about an hour and a half, I think. We went through the land supply methodology. There are questions about how we figured out how much capacity we have in our remaining land supply. So Chris Behe did a nice job of going through how we determine those figures. If anybody's interested, watch the afternoon meeting. It's pretty educational. We talked about some of the recommendations that the Planning Commission has made for changes. And Council voted to reinstate the policy regarding inclusionary zoning. And we did discuss the ADU policy as well. And the discussion will continue on August 1st. That's the next work session on the land use and housing chapter. On the 25th of this month, we'll be meeting with the Committee of the Whole on the economic development and environment chapters.
Councilmember Borneman.
Just a question. Wouldn't it make more sense if we continued with the housing and finished it in the next session before we move to another session? Since it's all, you know, instead of holding one part of one out, is if we don't finish the economic, do we then hold that out to leapfrog? It would make more sense to me. I'm just asking you and the council, wouldn't it make more sense to finish up a section before we move on to another?
With respect to housing and land use, we felt pretty certain that the council was going to want to have a fairly lengthy discussion. We're concerned that if we continue this to your next meeting on the 25th, it's going to wind up in an afternoon agenda with a full agenda for Committee of the Whole, and we're not going to have sufficient time to get into it. So that's why we've delayed it until August 1st, where it's an off week, so, we'll have an hour and a half or 2 hours. It's your prerogative if you'd like to change it.
The city council did do a doodle poll to see who was available, and that was the best date that we came up with. So we all
That
had
was
a
the only
say on
date we
that.
were asked about, so.
Actually, it's not.
What?
We were given 2 dates.
Well, it's the same week, though.
Still 2.
I know.
Councilmember Murphy.
I was just wondering too, for the Planning Commission recommendations, I was hoping that we could also get staff's input on, what the staff thoughts are on each of those recommendations. Maybe that could help us decipher and get through all of that.
Yeah, look at the comment tracker. That's where where the Planning Commission's recommendations and staff comments are included, but we'll make sure we highlight those for you.
Great, thank you.
One comment that I did receive later today was that sometimes it's confusing about which policy that we're talking about, and that maybe we could, while we're going through the comp plan, possibly put those up on the screen so that people can see, because there's I know there was a little confusion today, H7, H17, et cetera, and so maybe that would be something that would help the public and us make sure we're talking about the right policy. Anyone else? Any other additional comments or questions on? Okay. All right. Thank you. Well, thank you for the staff for the presentation today, Greg. Okay, so that is all of the committee of the whole, and we have one set of evening meetings for June 20th to approve.
Approval.
Second.
Discussion? No. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 7-0. Old or new business? I had one thing, if I may. This weekend was Pride here in Bellingham, and I just wanted to thank all the organizers of the parade and the festival, and what a great job they did. This was our biggest event ever. We had incredible participation, and just wanted to thank them for all their efforts. Councilmember Murphy.
I was just going to support Pride too. Thank you, Councilmember.
Councilmember Barker, did you have something for old and new business?
I supported Pride too.
Okay. Anyone have anything not Pride related?
It was great, and we acknowledged it in the afternoon, but it was the first time the Bellingham Fire Department came and marched in the Pride Parade, and many family members stood in solidarity with Local 106 and their queer brothers and sisters, but as well as showing that no matter what household they're going to go to, whatever your preferences are, whatever your lifestyle is like, they're going to give you equal service and really equitable service, I guess I should say. So it was just a pleasure, and I really appreciate this community, and thank you, Mayor, for your wonderful words there. So,
firefighters had the coolest shirts too.
Anyone else for old or new business? Okay. I'm going to move to our executive session report out. Our first item was a potential litigation. Staff provided information on a potential litigation matter for information and discussion only. No action was taken. For item number 2, collective bargaining contract negotiations for IAFF Local 106S. Staff provided information on the proposed collective bargaining agreement between the city and IAFF Local 106S. Action, the council will entertain a motion to approve the agreement with the following general terms. Peter, do I read these or do you? I do? Okay, just checking. Wage increases. So most of these are retroactive. 2% for January 1, 2014, 2% January 1, 2015, 2% January 1, 2016, 3% January 1, 2017, and 0.5% July 1, 2017. Benefits, health benefits will remain status quo through 2016. In 2017, the bargaining unit will move to the Regents 250 and Group Health 200 plans and HDHP with HSA, and the Group Health PPO will also be offered.
Move approval.
Second.
Whatever you just said.
Yeah. Lots of acronyms there. Any discussion? Okay. Councilmember Lee.
Unfortunately, I'm going to feel I need to abstain from this vote. I wasn't there for a discussion.
It's probably a good idea. Okay, so we have a motion in front of us to accept the collective bargaining contract negotiations for IF Local 106S. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions?
Abstain.
Okay, so motion carries 6-1 with 1 abstention. And with that, we're going to move to the mayor's report.
Good evening. I have 3 things I'd like to mention, maybe 4. We've been having feedback on these. Sorry about that. Okay. First of all, last week we had the badging ceremony where where District 8 came into the city of Bellingham, plus we had some promotions. And it was very nice to have it here. Usually we have it at the fire station, and it was nice to see all the families here, and everybody was pretty happy about the whole thing, so it was fun to be here for that. I got solar panels last week, so I just thought I'd announce that. We talked about EDI funding today, and I want to say that the EDI funding that the city just got or just received from the county was approved quite a bit ago, and it was about 4 years ago we instituted a scoring practice, and this particular grant did not have to go through that practice because it was part of a bigger discussion at the time. And I just wanted to appreciate the county executive's support of maintaining an agreement that was made years ago, even though it didn't meet procedurally with the new process that we have. And I thought that I had kind of let that go by before, so I just wanted you to know that that the county executive was very appreciative of that. And finally, one more thing about the Pride Parade, biggest one. It was fun to ride in the parade. I got my brother-in-law's 1950 restored Cadillac that belonged to Rudolph Valentino's ex-wife. I don't know how this works, but there's a story behind it. And a couple of the police officers came up to me, and we mentioned about the firefighters participating, and said that people were coming up and telling them how appreciative they were of our police department and of how they interact with the community, and said thank you for what they're doing. So I just wanted to mention that too, because as we all know, there are places across this country where that isn't happening. And so I think we need to acknowledge here that
I have just a quick question. How's Chad Cristelli and the other officer that were in the bike wreck?
I haven't heard anything this week, but what I heard at the end of last week, after I saw a picture of his face, which was not good, is that he was on his way home. He's going to fully recover, but it's going to be a long recovery because he broke a lot of things when they flipped off that bike. So
Tell him we all say hi.
I will. One appointment, just for your information, Charles Storrs to the Mayor's Neighborhood Advisory Committee. And with that, good night.
One more thing for the good of the order. I realize I might have been a little quick on my response there, and I just wanted to thank the council. We realize that the comprehensive plan does take extra time. It only happens every 10 years, so we can't make everyone's schedule fit, but we are doing our best, and we have nothing scheduled during our vacation time. That was the one thing that I want you to know. Those 3 weeks, there is nothing scheduled. So I just wanted to thank you for trying your best to make it work in August. Yeah, we have 3 weeks in August, and I did not book anything in that time.
Say consent agenda.
Move approval. Thanks, Roxanne.
Let's go. Second.
Consent agenda.
Move approval.
Second. See, I lost.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 7-0. Final consideration of ordinances.
Agenda Bill 21256, an ordinance of the City of Bellingham, Washington, amending Bellingham Municipal Code Title 10.30 to repeal BMC 10.30.020, which prohibits the possession, sale, or use of tasers, stun guns, and similar electronic or energy devices or weapons, adopting BMC 10.30.015, prohibiting the unlawful display of weapons, including electronic control devices, and amending BMC 10.30.005 by repealing the adoption of RCW 9.41.270 by reference.
Move third and final.
Second.
Dan Hamel,
Aye.
Jean Knutson,
Aye.
Michael Lillquist,
Aye.
Roxanne Murphy,
Aye.
Pinky Vargas,
Aye.
April Barker,
Aye.
Terry Borneman.
Aye.
Ordinance passes 7-0. Agenda Bill 21276, an ordinance of the City of Bellingham amending Bellingham Municipal Code 9.12.080 by changing the penalty for noncompliance with Bellingham Municipal Code 9.12 from a crime to a civil infraction and establishing the penalty for noncompliance.
Move third and final.
Second.
Jean Knutson,
Aye.
Michael Lillquist,
Aye.
Roxanne Murphy,
Aye.
Pinky Vargas,
Aye.
April Barker,
Aye.
Terry Borneman,
Aye.
Dan Hamel.
Aye.
Ordinance passes 7-0. Agenda Bill 21261, an ordinance amending Bellingham Municipal Code, Chapter 17.10, to adopt by reference the 2015 editions of the International Building Code, International Residential Code, International Mechanical Code, International Fuel Gas Code, International Property Maintenance Code, International Existing Building Code, National Fuel Gas Code, International Plumbing Code, International Energy Conservation Code, Uniform Plumbing Code, and Washington City's Electric Code, and the 2011 edition of the Liquefied Petroleum Gas Code as amended as set forth herein.
Move third and final.
Second.
Michael Lillquist,
That's an aye.
Roxanne Murphy,
Aye.
Pinky Vargas,
Aye.
April Barker,
Aye.
Terry Borneman,
Aye.
Dan Hamel,
Aye.
and Jean Knutson. Ordinance passes 7-0. Agenda Bill 21280, an ordinance relating to land use planning, amending the Western Washington University Institutional Master Plan, and addendum to the Western Washington Neighborhood Plan.
Move third and final.
Second.
Roxanne Murphy,
Aye.
Pinky Vargas,
Aye.
April Barker,
Aye.
Terry Borneman,
Aye.
Dan Hamel,
Aye.
Jean Knutson, Michael Lillquist.
Aye.
Ordinance passes 7-0. Agenda Bill 21265, an ordinance of the City of Bellingham amending Chapter 4.84 of the Bellingham Municipal Code, disposition of surplus property.
Second.
Pinky Vargas,
Aye.
April Barker,
Aye.
Terry Borneman,
Aye.
Dan Hamel,
Aye.
Jean Knutson, Michael Lillquist,
Aye.
Roxanne Murphy.
Aye.
Ordinance passes 7-0. Agenda Bill 21183, an ordinance amending the 2015-2016 biennial budget recognizing an additional $200,000 revenue in the street fund and appropriating equal funds for expenditure on repair and maintenance of natural resources.
Move third and final.
Second.
April Barker,
Aye.
Terry Borneman,
Aye.
Dan Hamel,
Aye.
Jean Knutson, Michael Lillquist,
Aye.
Roxanne Murphy,
Aye.
Pinky Vargas.
Aye.
Ordinance passes 7-0.
Thank you. Okay, so thank you all for joining us. Our next council meeting is July 25th, 2016. Until next time, we are adjourned.